Sputtercut and I are getting up there in age, and this brings back a lot of memories when you think about who was all here and who was all gone now. These guys are all gone. Lawrence is gone, Bernie's gone, Zane, all them people, all up and down the beach. Just about all them people that originally started fishing are gone.
One of the things I think is very important, we got to do it before we forget about all where everybody was at. Because I talked to some of the young ones, think that, so-and-so fished here, so-and-so fished there. I says, yeah, but when they started, they fished over here. Every boat, every lot, boat, and family had 600 feet of land on the beach. And they signed a lease with the tribe that was theirs for the season. And nobody come the next year and take it away from them. That was theirs until they wanted to give it up and not fish again.
Our uncle started, he was coming from LaConner on he fished a Swinomish slough up there. And he was coming back, bringing his boat back to Tulalip, and he was coming by Spibada. And he could see them fishing there just like how that cove is right there. They were just all inside of that cove right up close to the beach. So he went and talked to the superintendent who lived in Tulalip at the time. And the guy said, there's no law against you guys fishing out there. So he engineered a net of some sort. I don't know where he got it, probably down in Seattle somewhere. And figured out how you had to hang that net to make it fish. There's a little trick to that too. But yeah, this is where we started out, was on this beach, and if you listen to Lawrence's first, when he found the fish here, I think he mentions Martin, Tom, trying to think of who else, that started out this beach seining thing, and then everybody else kind of caught on. You ask me what beach seining is. It's anchoring one end of the net on the beach and running the net out and around in kind of you start out in kind of a half circle, and then the boat tows that end into the beach. And on the other end, the beach end is on a windlass, and they're winching that in by hand. When the other boat gets close enough to the beach, they hook that up to another winch. And then when that other winch gets both ends to the beach, then they start hand pulling it. You have to remember that the beach seine, the lead line is a little bit shorter than the cork line. So as you're pulling it in, you're creating a sack in there. So the lead line comes in, and the cork line's here and the lead line's here, but there's a big sack in what they called the bunt. That was the middle of the net. That was the heaviest part of it. And when we got both ends of the beach, both ends pulled in and and that's when you had to sack the fish up, and that was what they generally did, and of course in them days there was a lot of fish, so it ain't like how they come out here now and you get 10 or 15 fish, and of course there wasn't sea lines then. Or there might have been, but they weren't bothering us. But that's the basic principle of beach seining.
Because the nets are made out of cotton years ago, and they'd come to us in just pure white. The nets are pure white, and 4-inch meshes, which we usually used. And what happened was we'd have to tar them. We'd buy the tar, and then we'd have to get a bunch of tubs. We'd have a big tub on one side and one tub on the other side, and right in the middle we'd have where you'd winch the things or bring them through just like a wash machine roller. You'd crunch the tar out of out of the net as much as you could as you brought them from one side to the other side. And after you got done with it, then you put it on a rack. Put it on the rack, and they're only good for 1 year because the cotton web was just, I don't know, it just didn't last long. Even with a tarred net, it wouldn't last very long. And and a lot of times, you know, we had a tough time just getting it because of the heat was really, really hot on the net. It'd make the net pretty brittle. So we had a hard time there. So we just had to pray that the sun wouldn't beat on it too bad, where it wouldn't dry really fast, you know, and make the net brittle, where the fish hit it and then could bust it easy. And that was the thing we had. Plus the rope, we stretched the rope out, and I talked about it earlier, is how we stretched it out all the way from, you know, Elotlat's house, back to his house, back to my house, behind my house where I grew up, on a tree behind his house, and stretched it all the way down the hill, and try to get it so it wouldn't kink up. So when we hung the net on the rope and everything, it wouldn't kink up when we got the net all hung with the rope there. And the different things too was you got styrofoam corks now, before we had ours was just regular cork, just like you have out of a champagne bottle. You have regular cork, and that was really a struggle sometimes because in the fall your corks were almost sinking, and no matter what you did, they were almost sinking on you. It was really a struggle to maintain your corks to make sure that they wouldn't fail on you and really sink on you. So that was one of the things we really struggled with. In the wintertime, though, they dried out, and we did it again the following year.
In the beginning, the boats were made of wood. Some of the people patched their boats with fiberglass, but God, it wasn't until real late, maybe even the 60s, when they started coming out with different fiberglass boats. But they were primarily wood. And I know Tom built a couple of boats for different people out here. Lawrence had, what did he have, 3 boats? 4 boats? Yeah. 4 boats that he, in the wintertime for something to do, he'd remodel the boat or redo it or turn it into a beach seiner. Because some of the boats that we bought weren't set up to beach seine. One of the ones that he had and one of the ones that we had, we got in Loch Connor, and they would go about 40 miles an hour, you know, and that was what Pinoak was talking about earlier, you know, and ours was, they have beach seining up at Lone Tree up in Loch Connor too, you know, so they beach seined up there too. But like you say, you know, the boats were primarily made out of wood, you know. These guys would find a hull somewhere, and somebody would put a keel in it maybe, or put a tunnel in it, and set it up for a motor and put a little cab on it, and they'd be ready to go. But you know, they fit them up for different types of engines. Gray Marine was one. I think Willys made another motor that did a lot of towing. You know, the Gray Marine was a fast engine. That's what Lawrence had in his, and we had in ours, that made it go so fast. And that was fast for a beach seiner, you know. You didn't need near that much power to be moving around that fast. It was kind of fun for the young guys running it though, you know. Just make a run to wherever you needed to go. But yeah, they were primarily wood, and they were privately owned, you know, and that's kind of a weird word, privately, you know, but they were owned by different families. Each family had their own boat, and like Pinoak was saying earlier, each family had their own spot, you know, and that's where that boat, net, and family and everybody lived, right there, someplace close by. I think Pinoak started out down this way, didn't you, Pinoak?
With Herman, yeah.
With Herman, yeah.
What was a typical day like in the summer camp? What was that like?
Well, the crew got woke up probably about 4:30 before daylight, and they generally put a set in the water before breakfast. Because while they were making that first set, like Spotted Cud was talking about, his mother and our aunt were the cooks, and they would cook breakfast while we were making that first set. But like Spotted Cud said, you know, each person had their own spot here. And when he talks about 600 feet, it doesn't seem like much, you know, but you had your camp, you had you had your fire so you could cook crabs, you had your little fire pit so you could make a stick and put a flounder on a stick and cook it like that. And that was just basically what we did down there, you know. And sometimes, depending upon where you was and when the fish were running, like Lawrence and them had 2 boats, and they were going one would come in, the other one go right back out again. And we were the same way at Tulalip. My dad would be in one set, he'd come around Sardin, and I'd go right around the outside of him, so that there was that, you know, some room in between my net and his, and he was coming in. And you had to be a little bit faster in there because it was all a drop off. So you had to get the net in the water, and you had to get it pulled over that drop off before the lead line sunk down behind the drop off. You know, sometimes you get hooked up like that and it's impossible to move it. Lawrence's fishing grounds was all flat.
And the only ones that, not too many of them had 2 boats. Majority of them had 1 boat apiece, because sometimes it's pretty hard to get a crew. You couldn't get a crew because you had to have 2 corkmen and 2 lead line and somebody to splash. So it's one that it was a struggle sometimes to find out. Unless if you had two crews right alongside of each other, you're okay, because you could be short one guy and they could flip-flop back and forth on 2 crews from this 600 feet to this 600 feet and walk over here and help them pull the net in, come back over here, or vice versa. So that happens sometimes too, you know, where they helped each other. But like Yalala said, though, it was a starting at the end of the 30s and into the 40s, where the family got together and did something that come with where Uncle Lawrence seen that those fish jumping and made it start, and that's what started everybody on this beach coming out. You know, and Uncle Lawrence, and you see on Channel 99, he give credit to the ones that helped. Was the one that followed after he did was Martin Williams and Tom Reeves, and like Yalala was saying there too, they're almost the boat builders too. All 3 of them were the boat builders. They always made sure they had good boats, and they did have good boats. Everybody had good boats, but it's the idea that it was one that they built their own. But probably the biggest thing is that it wasn't only family on the boat, though. It wasn't only family. It was whoever you can get to fish with you a lot of times. It's who you can get there to stay on the crew and stay there with you and everything. And that was a struggle sometimes to maintain the crew that you had. Right here is where Tommy Gobin was at, right here, right at the boundary. Next to him was Reuben Sheldon, and he come around here where Reuben is. That's one of Tom Reeves's boats. And to come around the point here, where you go in here and you hit Tom Reeves's other boat, and that's where Gabe Gobin skippered the boat. He'd come in every on odd years, he'd come back home and always help Tom skipper his boat on here. Then you move down the beach a ways, then you Chuck Hill, he come in 55. Tom had his boats in there for, probably about, he had to come in probably in about early 40s with his boats. And Chuck Hill is the next one to Tom. He was about in 55. Next one coming in, Ray Fryberg, he come in here, and he come in let's say 53. 53 he came in there.
Well, we come down here about 1949. Right up there's a maple tree, you can see it. And we lived in there first in an old equipment crummy of George Adams's. And then we moved over to the middle. Of course, there wasn't no houses in there then. Then pretty soon all the houses start building up, but we fished from, maybe 2 houses over from that ramp and all the way down to that little point down there, which is more than 1,200 feet, but I think what we paid for was about from right here down. But Spotted talks about when we caught all them fish, it was right down here, close to that next little point. There's a little cove there. And it goes out and it's pretty shallow where that point goes out because there's a spit there. And my dad and his grandfather, Ray Fryberg, and Brick, one of our uncles from Squim, were fishing. And they caught 17.5 ton of humpies in 3 sets. And the buyer, somebody finally called the buyer because Ernie came straight down here, but everybody was catching fish. But Ernie came in here first and took what my dad had and almost loaded him down. But that was one of the biggest catches that anybody ever got around in here.
Next slide down here is Herman Williams and Senior, and he come in 51. And he had his first boat that his dad gave him, because that's when I start fishing. When I fished with Herman there as a splash boy, that's the first time I went out and went camping and did that down there. You know, you always had a young person doing, whether it was a young lady or a young man that was doing the splashing, anywhere from 8 to 12, 13 years old. But then you'd have older ones, older teenagers or adults pulling lead line and cork line in. And like Yolotla was talking about, the lead line has to come in first so you could bag up the fish inside. And it's usually, you know, each one has a chore to handle what they have and make sure that they can bag up the fish when they come in. That's how you learn how to work, you know, and I always say that, you know, I wish all my family could have learned how to work on a beach, because that's really a training thing, just to learn how to do all the things on the beach. It's really tremendous. This is where in 1951 I fished with Herman on the boat right here, and we fished out here in 1951. And I'll tell you one thing, there was so much fish, just like what's going on right here. That was every day. That was every day. And that was all the time. You know, you could see this, and the humpies jumping like this. They're going like this for about a month. And the fish were just jumping all the time, you know, and you think this is a lot. Well, this is a lot right now for a few days, but back in the, you know, in the 40s and 50s, you know, this was everyday occurrence during the season of whether it was humpies or what it was that was running as silvers as well as chum, you know. But Herman got his boat from his dad in 1951. That was the first year he fished on his own. He had his dad had a boat that had it set aside there and just left it down by Hermosa, down by the where the resort was at, and it just sat there for a couple of years. And he asked if his dad if he could have it, and his dad says yeah, and so he started and went on and got his own crew. From then on, he fished in beach seine for about probably 10 years straight. Ah, they're lousy out here. Holy smoly! Could you believe that? And that's it. I can't believe this.
But George Adams was a big part of all. He's the one that built Tulalip. We camped in there for years.
Way in the back.
Way in the back, and then Shorty bought a house in there. After they started getting quite a few homes in there. But then the Tulalip White Association said, no, we won't have no Indians living in here. So they made the people take their money back.
We slide down here further is where Ray Sheldon had his 2 boats. This is at Sunny Shores in the Cove, and is where Ray Sheldon used to have his. He had his 2 boats in here, and he fished on here. And Martin is right down here, down the ways here, and that's where Martin had his 2 boats, and that's where Yolotla was talking about his 2 green ones he had. One of them was a Green Hornet, and he called it, the other one was, they called it a Wasp. And that's the ones that Martin built himself, you know, That's the only boats they had right in this one little area. Then they go around the point, then you have about 4 or 5 more right in there. But there was nothing over in here, But you always had too many buoys in here, and that's what caused the problem too, besides that. So you had to get the buoys out of the way, and we had rights to have them move their buoys, so that was a good part of it, that we had that rights to have them move their buoys so we could, make the sets in here. Because it was kind of tough sometimes when you had these boats out here and the buoys out here to be able to do things. But that was part of the 50s as well, to be able to come in here, because everybody's seen the money that was made on humpies. So they all come in here and start bought boats and come out and start fishing, not just one boat but 2. Because when Ray come in, he started with 2 boats, and not just 1 boat. And most of the people come in with 1 boat, then added on the 2nd boat later. But Ray didn't do that. He come in and started in with 2 boats in here. But the starting of the thing is just like what Yalat was talking about, was the family was doing a lot of things, and I got to give, the fishing that Uncle Lawrence did, and he come in, and Uncle Shorty did, and Uncle Chuck Sheldon did, and because they did a lot of things, my Uncle Jim, and I mean, they could see fish. Those guys could see fish that were way down there, and us young punks, we'd look down there. We're looking at the same place. Where'd you see them at? And they could see things that we couldn't see. You have to have the eyes for it, and they had the eyes for everything, And all the fish come in here, no matter what happened. And a lot of times, the saying was, and if you look over to Camino Island, they always talk about the fish quartering in from Camino Island, right off the head of Camino Head. Off here, right into here. That's what they talked about, and that's what, Lawrence or Herman talked about, and they were talking about there how the fish kind of come around Head Island and come right off in Camino Head and come right in here and quarter right in this way. That's what they call it, quartering in. You look at when the fish start getting wild, when you make a set, and the fish are almost into the beach, and the fish are really wild in your net. Well, the blackfish are coming around the point. The blackfish come in here or killer whales or whatever you want to call them, and just as pretty as ever, and that's part of us as the tribe, and I realize when you say that we're the salmon people, but it's the idea that I look at blackfish that move the fish up the river. They move them up the river and try to make things happen positively for us, and for us is just to help us. I think they're part of us, and what they did here was tremendous, I felt, And the next one over here is Martin Williams and his 2 boats, and his boys, Skipper Dat, Steve and Marvin, the Rooster, they call nickname Rooster, and Spud. They had a good nickname. They did a good job, and they really were hard fishermen. Then we come around here at the point, is where Ernie Clattisby had his boat. And he come in 1953 as well. Then you had next to it was Chuck James. Chuck James come in there. He come in 53. Then Shorty Fryberg, Abraham, he come in, and he was one of the early 40s as well. He fished here with 2 boats in here too as well. Point is where Zane Hatch had his boat, and he come in 1953 as well. Next to him would be Lawrence Jones come in here in 53 as well. I think Stan has the next 2 boats. I think he come in 51. I think he come in 1951. He come in fishing in here. He had 2 boats in here as well. And next one is Lawrence Williams had 2 boats. And he had his 2 boats here. Then Bernie Gobin had his boats right in here as well. You know, and we come in here at the cove over here on the south side of Speebada, and he had Roy Henry had his boats, and he came in. I can't remember what year it was, but in 49 or 51, one of the years he come in, he fished in here as well.
That was Roy Henry's dad?
Roy Henry's dad, yeah, that's Loretta's dad. Loretta, you know, Loretta James.
Yeah.
Then we come by Tulalip Shores, and he had Polly Jones fish next to his mom, you know, Ma Jones and Carl. You know, they
Linda Jones's dad?
Linda's dad, yeah. They had two boats in here. Right in here, they had two boats. So they fished along here, and we come around the point. Hagen Sam fished. Hagen Sam, he had his boat in there. He come in about 1953 as well. Hagen Sam fished in here. And Mariah fished along in here. When she eventually bought Roy Henry's boat, she fished over here on a slide in between Tulalip Shores and Arcadia. She fished here a lot. For kings and just about everything. She fished in there, and she did a wonderful job in there too. And Arcadia, where do you guys see where Arcadia is at? Shoemakers. Right about in here is where George Williams first got his right here, and he fished just below Arcadia, and that was his last boat, and they fished down in here.
You guys miss it?
The fishing?
Beach seining?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I wish we had everything out here that we could do this over again, and the families could live on the beach again like this, you know, because that's a lot of things that they would see, the toughness of the beach, the toughness of sleeping on the beach, the getting up early, and the work that it maintained to be able to do all the things it did to be able to get the cooking, as well as the wood that you had to furnish for the stove, and everything, because everybody had a wood stove. So you had to get wood, and you had to cut it, and everybody had a part. And even ladies did a lot of things, you know, but most of it was, their job was to cook for the crew. But this was one of the things that I missed, probably one of the big things I missed, that my family never got a chance. I wish that our kids had a chance to see do this over again. Turn the clock. Yeah, turn the clock back, you know, back in there into the 40s, but you know, you can't do that. But just there's no fish now.
Well, the biggest thing that I seen it created was it created a family tie. You know, it allowed the families to be together.